All right, let's dive in. Today we are talking about a super powerful and honestly much simpler way to connect your apps right to the Snowflake data cloud. I'm talking about the Snowflake SQL API. It's a tool that's really designed to get rid of all those clunky drivers and complicated setups.
So if you're a developer, you know this pain, right? You've built this awesome new app, and all you want to do is connect it to your data. But nope. First, you've got to wrestle with these heavyweight drivers. You're dealing with version conflicts, a mountain of config files. It's just a total drag on your momentum.
And here's the thing. The core problem is that the old ways of doing things just weren't designed for the kind of flexibility we need now. You're constantly installing these heavy packages and libraries, and it becomes a huge pain, especially if you're building, say, a multi-tenant solution or an app that needs to work with a bunch of different programming languages. So let's look at the difference here, because it is pretty stark. You've got the traditional drivers over here, heavy, usually tied to one specific language. And then you have the Snowflake SQL API. It's lightweight, it doesn't care what language you're using. I love this analogy. Think of it like a universal translator. If your application can speak basic web language, HTTP, it can talk directly to your data. Simple as that.
Okay, let's get specific about why the old way can be so limiting. For starters, Snowflake officially supports drivers for just 7 languages. So what if you're using something else? Well, you're kind of out of luck. And then there are the upgrades. A new driver version comes out, and suddenly you might have to make a ton of code changes. Oh, and if you're trying to manage connections in a dynamic, multi-tenant app, that can turn into a real security nightmare fast.
So you're probably asking, how does Snowflake sidestep all these problems? Well, the magic is in its architecture. It's all built around a RESTful API. And trust me, that design choice is a total game changer for making things simple and compatible. Let's break down exactly what that means.
Now, if you're not deep in the weeds with this stuff, REST, or Representational State Transfer, is basically just a super common, standard way to build web services. The beautiful part is, it uses the same HTTP protocols that power the entire web. What does that mean for you? It means you can use the tools and libraries you already know. There's no weird proprietary protocol you have to go and learn.
And the actual process? It's incredibly straightforward. Here's how it goes. Your app just bundles up your SQL query, sends it off as a standard post request, Snowflake catches it, checks to make sure it's valid, and runs it. And what comes back? A nice, clean, standard JSON package with your data. That's it. No complicated middleman. It's just a direct conversation between your app and your data.
All right, so that's the big picture, the theory. But what about actually doing it? How do you make your very first secure call to this API? Well, it all hinges on a really modern and secure way of handling authentication. We can really break this down into 4 main steps. First, you generate what's called a key pair. Then you use that to create a secure token. You'll hear it called a JWT. After that, you build your request, and finally, you send it off to get your results. Now, I know that might sound a little complicated at first, but it's actually a super standard and highly secure way of doing things online.
So the whole security model is built on this idea of key pair authentication. You generate 2 keys that are mathematically linked. You have a private key, which you keep secret, locked away safely on your server, and then you have a public key, which you give to Snowflake. Every time your app makes a request, it signs it with the private key. It's like a unique, unforgeable signature. Snowflake then uses your public key to check that signature and verify, yep, this request is legit.
And that signature gets packed into something called a JSON Web Token, or JWT for short. The best way to think of a JWT is like a secure, digital passport for your API request. It's got all the important info right inside. Who it's from, that's the issuer, who it's for, a really strict expiration time so it can't be used forever, and a fingerprint of your public key for validation. It's an incredibly robust way to prove you are who you say you are.
Okay, so once you've got that JWT passport, the rest is honestly the easy part. You just send a simple post request to a single endpoint, API v2 statements. And what goes in the body of that request? Just your plain old SQL statement. That's it, really. Now, here's a really key feature. This whole process is asynchronous, and that is fantastic for building apps that feel fast and responsive. See, when you send your query, Snowflake doesn't make you wait. It immediately sends back a statement handle. Just think of it like taking a number at the deli. It's your ticket number. Your app can then check in on that ticket status to see when the results are ready, all while the rest of your app keeps running smoothly. No freezing, no waiting.
Okay, so we can connect securely, we can fetch data, but you're probably wondering, is this just for simple select queries? And the answer is a big, resounding no.
You get the full power of Snowflake SQL right at your fingertips.
And it all starts with the SQL you already know and write every day. So let's say you want to pull the creation date, address, and zip from your customers table. You just write a totally standard select statement, exactly like this one, and pop it into the body of your API call.
And the data you get back, it's just beautifully structured. The JSON response has this data array, and inside that, each row from your query result is its own neat little array. This makes it so easy for your app to just loop through and parse everything, exactly in the order you asked for it.
And I really want to stress this. This is not just a read-only tool. Not at all. The API supports the whole shebang. You can select, you can insert, you can update, and you can delete records. It also supports most of your standard DDL and DML statements, which basically means you have almost complete control over your data's lifecycle, right from your application's code.
Phew, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, right? We've gone from the problems with old-school drivers all the way to the nuts and bolts of making an actual API call. So let's tie this all together and really focus on why this matters so much for anyone building modern applications. When you step back, the benefits are just crystal clear. First, you're free from drivers and all the headaches that come with maintaining them. You get universal compatibility. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're building a web app in PHP, a mobile app in Swift, or a microservice in Go. The security is baked in from the very beginning, not just tacked on as an afterthought. And the whole approach is just a perfect fit for today's flexible, modern architectures. You know, there's this quote from Ronald Steelman that just hits the nail on the head. He said, "The whole point of the Snowflake SQL API was to give developers a lighter weight option, one that doesn't force them to install all these heavy packages and drivers." And that's really what it's all about. It's about removing friction so you can focus on what you love, building amazing applications, instead of fighting with your infrastructure. So that really leaves us with one final question to think about. When you have a connection to the data cloud that is this direct, this secure, and this flexible, what new doors does that open for you? What amazing things are you going to build?